So let's take a closer look at two of the earth pigments, raw umber and burnt umber. They're both ochres, which ochre just means that they're pigments made from the earth. And specifically with umber, it's iron with manganese oxide. Basically, you find that rock, you grind it up into pigment, add a binder, and you have paint. It's a brown shade and can be quite cool and dark depending on which version that you're using, whether it's raw or burnt umber. Originally is a natural pigment, but not all manufacturers use the natural pigment in their tube of paint. Some of them use a mix of synthetics to create the pigment or mimic the pigment. And it's one of the oldest pigments known to people. It's been found on cave paintings in Spain, so it has been used for hundreds or thousands of years. Also very inexpensive, which is nice. So the raw umber, the raw in the name means that the pigment is unheated, so it's in its raw form, and it tends to be more of a yellow leading brown. I'm testing out the Holbein acrylic. It's made with multiple pigments, so it's one of the manufacturers that uses a mix of pigments to create their synthetic version. And that includes PY42, which is yellow iron oxide, PR101, synthetic iron oxide red, and PBK11, which is Mars black. Very opaque, excellent permanence. Next up we have burnt umber. It's called burnt because they take the raw pigment and they heat it up, and so that's how the burnt name comes to be. And the color changes a little bit. It tends to be a bit more of a reddish brown. And I'm using Golden Artist Colors Burnt Umber, which has a single pigment, which is PBR7, which is brown iron oxide. Now you might be wondering, what does the word umber actually mean? There's a little bit of, it's not completely known. Some people say it's because the original pigments that were used came from the Umbria region of Italy, but apparently you can't really find that type of rock in that area. So the more, I guess, accepted version of the name is that it comes from the Latin word for shadow, which I believe is umbra, and being a brown, and a lot of artists use this for shadows. That makes a lot of sense. Now the question is, do you want to add this to your palette? Maybe you already use it and just want to learn a little bit more about it? So I've done some color mixing tests so we can see which one you might want to use, or compare how they actually work with other paints. So I'll show you some of the paints that I am doing the mixing with. So 2 yellows, Hansa Yellow Lemon, Cadmium Free Yellow Medium, 2 reds, Cad Free Red Medium, Quin Magenta, Ultramarine Blue, and Phthalo Blue Green shades. So those are the primary colors. And then I have 3 secondary colors, the Dioxazine Purple, Sap Green Hue, and Cadmium Orange. And then I use titanium white just to lighten the shades so that we can see what we're really dealing with, because sometimes they're very dark. So let me just clear this off. Now, if you've seen some of my other color mixing videos, usually I do the mixing and apply it right in front of you, but I've already done that. So here is the swatch sheet. We'll start with the raw umber side. I've covered the burnt umber so that we just focus on this one side. So the raw umber, just a reminder, this is the Holbein. It is a little bit more of a yellow leaning brown, but it's quite dark right out of the tube. And as you add more titanium white, it can get to be this nice white, kind of a creamy beige color. Mixed with Hansa Yellow Lemon, with just a lot of the yellow and a little bit of the raw umber. It just kind of, muddies it up, dirties it up. Or you just get an even more warm brown if you use a lot of the raw umber. So as you go through all of these different colors, this column is where there's a lot more of the mixing paint, whereas this column is mostly the raw umber. And as you can see, it just really beautifully neutralizes any of these colors. So if you want to use, Cad Free Red Medium, but you don't want this intense red, just add a touch of the raw umber and it gets a little bit darker and just more muted. And that's really beautiful. And then you can add the white and you get these really lovely muted, not really pastel, but really lovely light muted shades. And then of course you can have a ton of different shades of brown. as well. So you can make it lean basically anywhere around the color wheel. So, you know, you add a little bit of the Quin Magenta and you get more of like a purpley reddish brown. Phthalo Blue Green, this one, it's actually quite a green gray, so that's interesting. And then you compare it to the Sap Green, which is the true green on this swatch sheet, and it's a beautiful olivey color. So just imagine all of the different rock colors of rocks you could do, let's say, using raw umber. So this, you know, could be a nice addition to a palette, to have raw umber, to be able to, you know, really just make dark shadows or, you know, like I said, rocks, things like that. But let's take a look at burnt umber. So I'll just uncover that side. Just a reminder, this is the golden burnt umber. So not, I wouldn't say dramatically different from the raw umber, which is not surprising. They're both browns. But you can see the burnt umber is just, it's a little bit more vibrant in comparison to the raw umber mixes. The raw umber, it's just a lot more chalky looking. Burnt umber straight from the tube, it's quite dark, but definitely a redder brown than the raw umber. And as you add titanium white to it, you can see just a much warmer kind of grayish, reddish, beigey color. And of course, mixing with the Hansa Yellow Lemon, not like dramatically different, but as you go down through some of these, you can see just there's more vibrancy on the burnt umber side. And sometimes it's a little bit easier to see with the amount that has a bit of the white added to it. These aren't as, let's say, muted as the raw umber. And of course, if you use a lot of the burnt umber, you can get tons of different shades of brown, and then adding the white here, just some really, really beautiful, like kind of a dusty rose color here. Just really, really beautiful. So both work really, really well to neutralize. But just based on this, I think burnt umber just produces much nicer colors. And I think you can have a little bit more control of, do you want something that's a little bit more vibrant, or you can dull it down a little bit further by adding a bit more of the burnt umber. Whereas with the raw umber, it really dulls down a lot quicker. Now, I did a test of 2 different paintings using raw umber and burnt umber. So raw umber on the left here and burnt umber on the right. And then of course, here's the colors that I used to mix. So just some rocks, because I thought, you know, when I was looking at the swatch sheet, it looks like you could do tons of really great rocky scenes. So I just did this up really quickly. Colors don't necessarily match. I wasn't aiming to get them exactly the same, but you know, in a similar color family. Both work really well for this type of a scene. But burnt umber, I just find I could get the darks just a little bit darker. I had a little bit more control over, you know, do I want it a bit more vibrant, or do I want it a little less vibrant? So between these 2 colors, while both are great, in the future, if I'm choosing between these 2, I'd probably choose burnt umber. Now, I don't know if I am going to keep them on my palette. I'm going to finish doing all of my tests of the different ochres that I have. Because there's the raw sienna and burnt sienna as well. I've used burnt sienna quite a bit in a similar way to burnt umber, so I'll make that decision once I finish doing those tests.